Hey everyone, welcome to another panel here at Harness Unscripted. I'm Alan Shimel, Editor-in-Chief of DevOps.com, and thanks for joining us today on this panel. Our panel today is around cloud costs, FinOps as some refer to it as well, a cloud cost panel. We have a great panel lined up for you. Let me introduce you to our panel members and then we're going to dive right in. First of all, I want to introduce JP Eagleson. JP, welcome.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks, Alan.
JP, if you don't mind, give our audience kind of what company you work for, your title, a little background.
Sure, okay. My name's Joseph Eagleson, but I go by JP. And right now I'm the Director of IT Infrastructure at Sweetwater Sound. So my responsibilities there include overseeing from a high level all the server, network, telephony, platform, and help desk teams at Sweetwater. Sweetwater is located in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we're the 1 online music gear retailer in the country. And we're currently, I think, like number 75 of the internet's retailers top 500 list.
Congratulations. And
Thanks.
we're a customer.
Oh,
all right. Yep. And then next, so we have Tor, Magnus, and I can't even see the rest of it. Tor, I'm going to let you do the honors, man. Introduce yourself.
Thanks, Alan. So I'm Tor Magnus Castberg. I work for a company called Entur in Norway. So we're a company that does routing and ticketing for public transport for all public transport companies in Norway, and also including mobility. And yeah, basically if you travel in Norway, most likely you'll be using our systems. So I'm the team lead for the platform team there that oversees the building and maintenance of the cloud platform and the tool chain that's used by all our developers.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tor. And then we have Shelby, Shelby, I was going to have you go. Well, actually, go ahead, Shelby. Shelby Lewin, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Alan. I'm Shelby Lin. I'm a product manager at Relativity. Relativity is an e-discovery software, so we're in the legal technology space. I am the product manager for a lot of our automation, and I am the owner of our compute platform. So I work really closely with Cory, who's our architect, who's also on this panel, and we've been running our new Kubernetes software probably for about a year and a half. So this space is really exciting and new to our developers.
Fantastic. And then Shelby, you've already kind of helped me out here, but Cory, is it Wagehoft, right?
It's Wagehoft, yes. So yeah, my name's Cory Wegehoft. I'm an architect here at Relativity, primarily focused around our cloud engineering. I've been working closely, as Shelby said, with her for quite a while on our Kubernetes platform here at Relativity.
Fantastic. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. So I'm going to start our panel off with this. The two most ridiculous things that I ever try to do is figuring out my cloud provider bill and my cell phone bill. Why does it have to be this hard, right? To really, I mean, you can figure out, what you owe, or what they've already charged on your card or whatever, right? That's easy. But figuring out how they arrived at that number and what you're actually paying for and what you're getting and what you used is, I feel sometimes, it's deception technology. But, and I'm not alone. I've spoken to plenty of people who have this. So first of all, why can't we just do simplified cloud billing? Anybody?
Simple would be too easy. I mean, if it was simple, a lot of these cloud providers may not make as much money as they do.
Right. I would even go as far as to saying I actually prefer like cloud costing compared to on-prem costing. So I mean, at least with cloud, you're nickel and dimed for every little tiny thing, but it's much easier to get visibility into exactly what's being consumed by who. And it's easier to tell from like an application standpoint, like, hey, is my application actually profitable? What's the cost for this specific thing? It seems to be harder to do on-prem.
Is Tor, is that your take on it as well, that it's easier to itemize these things on cloud? I think you're on mute, Tor.
Sorry about that. I think in the end, yes, I would agree that overall it's easier to actually be able to identify these costs. I think you ask a very good question: is why is it so difficult? And I think a lot of it that comes from the fact that the way we're using cloud today is miles ahead of where this started out. I mean, in the beginning, you had one single tenant, you had a few VMs, and then we stuck Kubernetes on top and umpteen different services, and things got complex. And then, of course, you start adding more and more tenants that you are using in your organization. I think unavoidably it gets complicated, not at least for the cloud providers who have to try to figure out what's simple for whom. I mean, I think if we all compared how we've set up our infrastructure, I think we'd all find that we've done a lot of different choices that make our infrastructure unique. And I think unavoidably that becomes complicated. That said, I'd still agree with JP in that it's at least possible to figure out what we're spending our money on compared to a lot of the on-prem stuff where, I mean, quite often you haven't even figured in the personnel costs.
I think with also with cloud costs, yeah, it's very easy to get a high level cost, this is what you're spending on compute, network throughput, things like that. For where it does get a bit more challenging is when you're building, like your own internal managed service, like what we do with Kubernetes, where we're currently moving from a large amount of VMs globally into Kubernetes, which we can still see what the overall cost of the cluster is. Where it gets a little more difficult is understanding where is all of that, why is this costing so much? Like where, when you're trying to start slice and dice the cost of your individual applications in Kubernetes, and are you charging that back to different departments, verticals, or are you trying to calculate how much this individual end customer is costing you in compute and network throughput? That's when it starts to get more challenging. But the benefits of like just working in a cloud environment is a much better experience, especially for scaling. We have to scale up and down quite a bit. And that's where you can also take advantage of those tools to make sure you don't have this sunk cost or capital investment in a large data center where you might only be using a small amount of that computer at any given time. You can take advantage of the elasticity of using a cloud provider, but you have to make sure to actually take advantage of that.
Fair enough. So, I've heard people say that as a result of COVID and the work from home and remote working and everything else that we've seen on around the world, we've seen maybe 6 years worth of cloud transformation, cloud migration take place in 6 months. So it's been tremendous, right? And for many of us as vendors or people who are in the industries that touch on digital and cloud transformation of migration, we've been blessed and spared from the economic hardship that so many around the world have endured. However, this gold rush to the cloud has also resulted in a lot of surprises to architecture teams and to product teams and finance teams who all of a sudden maybe weren't expecting it to be quite as expensive. This transformation stuff ain't cheap, right? And how do we, well, first of all, have any of your organizations dealt with this over the last 6 months? Have you seen an increased move to the cloud as a result of COVID? And then have you seen a corresponding kind of surprise in the financials of it?
I think our transformation to the cloud began a little bit before COVID, and I think that we kind of hopped on board right in time. And as teams were moving their services and their applications over, everyone just thought they were going to start saving money right away, right? Like, you're going to move to Kubernetes, I'm going to have instant savings. And that's not always the case, because you can't really tweak your costs. You don't really know what you're requesting and what you're using. So that's kind of definitely allowed us to have visibility, and we've actually kind of been able to start tweaking our requests and our utilization to make sure that we're saving money. So I think that we kind of hopped on board at the right time, and really, now that we're in COVID, our costs are overanalyzed, I would say. They're constantly trying to find areas that there's waste. And so now we're able to kind of take those preactive measures and use our tooling to kind of find additional areas that we weren't really aware of before, to start saving money and really using this to our benefit during these uncertain times.
Excellent, Shelby. Anybody else? Your experience in this? I'm sorry, Tor, perhaps?
Yeah. So we've also kind of been fortunate to have jumped on this train quite early. I think we really started moving to the cloud in 2017. However, because we also outsourced all of our legacy infrastructure, we are actually able to compare some of those costs of the traditional on-prem stuff. And I have to agree that with what Shelby said, in that, it's you jump on board and you think, the nice thing about Kubernetes is that it's high density, you can pack things in, and it's all nice and smooth, and then you start you start increasing the number of nodes, and it's because when stuff is available, when compute power is available, it gets consumed. And to some degree, cloud is an infinite source of computing power. And when you can't give the developers an overview over how much they're actually using, how much are they actually spending, the temptation is just to take it all. So we've really found that the challenge has been to get the developers to realize what their limitations should be, how much they're actually costing, and where they can make savings. And of course, along with that is also, a developer testing something and then walking away from the test. There's unless you set up these systems, there's nothing telling the developer that you got stuff costing money that you're not even using. And that's, identifying these things are really the main challenge.
Absolutely. TJ, excuse me, not TJ, JP. I don't know why I thought TJ there, but go ahead.
No, I would, agree with Tor, especially when it comes to giving visibility to the people who are actually consuming the resources. That's not just in the cloud. I think that's on-prem too. The cloud accelerates all things. So if you have poor management of resources on-prem, if you have a messy house, then your cloud environments are also going to be messy and costly. So I think it behooves you to get, your house in order before you make a large move to the public cloud space.
I have a comment on that, though.
Yeah, sure.
There's one difference, which is quite often in on-prem, you have to accept the cost up front.
Yeah,
quite
right.
often you have to order that server, while in the cloud, they're all there for you. And unless you've put caps on the budget for specific teams and are managing it in that sense, then
Yeah.
Wild West.
I would agree with that. I will say that, since most on-prem costs are upfront capital costs, once that initial capital investment is made, it seems like the consumers of that investment just have amnesia about it. They just seem to forget that cost was ever made. And because the money's already spent, people seem to not be as careful as they should be with resource usage to ensure that it's not inefficient. It's not over provisioned. So even though there is this like limited capacity of on-prem resources, people seem to more readily consume those on-prem resources without regard to the opportunity cost of what else that capacity could be used for.
It's always been my experience that I think we tend to recycle on-premises resources than we do on the cloud. Right? It was always my experience is that as I moved from one instance to another, and we see this a lot with immutable and stuff, with immutable infrastructure, people don't shut off what they're not using. And that gets real expensive real quick in the cloud, where I think on-prem, you're like, yeah, that server in that rack right there, yeah, I'm gonna reuse that server. Where we don't have that concept of reuse as much in the cloud. At least that was my experience. I'm not, you guys have your own experiences. Shelby, Cory, what about it at your place? Is that true or?
Yeah, we definitely see environments where engineers will basically, they'll leave large amounts of workloads sitting there, and where they're not necessarily needed. Thankfully, we do, unless they're using a large, like leaving large versions of our applications around using a large amount of resources. That's a problem, but we do leverage auto scaling in all of our production and non-production environments to make sure we don't have excess capacity not being used. However, we do see engineering teams that leave applications like in non-production environments. They'll leave multiple versions of them sitting around running, wasting resources. So that's something that we have been actively trying to approach to remind engineering teams to remove their environments. We've also been exploring just basically putting a time to live on them. So, if this application, if this version has been sitting around for a few days, well, we're just going to terminate it. Also, it's a good practice for them to understand that their application could be terminated at any point, and they should be able to recover from that. In our non-Kubernetes environments, we do also, we have leverage like actually turning off some of those environments. Although I think Shelby would probably have a bit more insight in that because she worked very closely with another engineering team at Relativity on that. Would you be able to share anything about that, Shelby?
Yeah, we've kind of implemented schedules. So we know that people usually are sleeping or not really working all the time during off hours. So we turn off like auto shutdowns and auto turn-ons. And actually, I think we removed the auto turn-ons during COVID, just being like, hey, today you don't log into your environment, so let's just keep that off normally. And if you want to use it, then we're going to kind of tax you with a 10-minute activity in the morning, so to make sure your environment turns on, just to kind of find those little cost savings. We're kind of looking under all of those old rocks to see if there's anything else that we can find and save these days.
Shelby, were you at all surprised by how many things you turned off that no one ever turned back on?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Those are surprised, or like when we audited some of those old, Cory was saying that people are running like 3 versions behind. Someone's like, I really need that. We're like, that's not even running in production anymore. So what are you using? So yeah, the auditing kind of really has helped us.
JP, is that your experience as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. How often do you audit?
Not as often as I should,
I audit all the time. I think it's kind of part of the nature, and I think that it's kind of our move to the cloud and more of these like cloud native things has really allowed us. Like previously, these costs were an afterthought, right? Like you would only look into your costs when the finance guys are knocking at your door being like, hey, did you see your bill go up this month? And now it's kind of my weekly task that I go in there and I'm like, hey, this looks unnormal, and I can be more proactive, I guess, and I can go to finance being like, hey, look, I did see before you saw that my costs went up this week. Here's why. So I audit all the time, but I'm the product manager. I think it's really changed our ownership of like, this is full end-to-end service ownership. Our costs are an additional data point that really allow us to really to win better at our service. Everyone wants to be faster, but now we're also thinking, how can we be cheaper? So yeah, it's part of my bread and butter.
Yeah, with traditional VMs, we've found that it is easier to audit and turn those off and things like that. In the world of containers and Kubernetes, like I said earlier, it's a challenge that we're still working with right now. We look at overall costs, but we've been exploring ideas on, like I said, like being able to either terminate them automatically. Either engineering teams would get reminders or we just kill them. We're still exploring different options and ideas to try to keep those environments running as lean as possible.
Tor, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think I found it interesting when you asked the question, sort of how often do you audit, and to be honest, I felt guilty. However, I think one of the effects of COVID that we maybe hadn't considered in the beginning was that as soon as that happened, and as soon as we saw that there was going to be economic impact on the company, our team kind of turned around and said, well, we have to protect the rest of the employees as well, because they could be furloughed or even let go. And for us, it became very much an important point to find savings where we could, to make sure that we're taking care of everyone in the company as well. So for us, that was actually ended up being a driver to make sure that we're doing regular audits. And I agree with Shelby, kind of at this point, we know what our costs are. We know how they should be developing from 1 month to the next. And I think it's, even though there's so much negative things connected to what's happened since March, at least in Norway, there's still, I think, one of the positive outcomes is that we're actually much more capable of looking out for the company and realizing the costs.
Absolutely. Before we hop on to my next subject, anybody else want to add to that?
I was just going to agree with you, Tor. I think it's easy to focus on cost in the traditional sense, but there's always an opportunity cost, right? That money you spend on a service or product, that could be better spent elsewhere on R&D or marketing or better wages for your teammates or just keeping the company afloat.
Yep. So, not quite auditing, but in this vein of controlling costs, I saw a survey last week that the average lifespan of a container, and I know Shelby and Cory, you guys said you moved to Kubernetes, right? I don't know, JP and Tor, if you're running Kubernetes, Tor, Kubernetes, yep. So the average lifespan of a container, and keep in mind, not every container, this is average across your entire container thing. The average lifespan of a container is about 5 minutes. There are containers that stay up forever. There are others that get taken down almost immediately. But when you average it all out, survey I saw, it said 5 minutes. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe it's 10 minutes. I don't know. But, when you have that sort of turnover in your infrastructure, right? Audits are audits, and however often you do them, great. But, how do you keep the lid on without, putting do you put budgets in per developer or per application, or right? How do you control those costs? Right? What are the dials you need to set? And I think people out there are interested in that.
So I use some sort of monitoring. I use budgets, but when I first started, I had no idea what I was looking for. Like Cory and I kind of said in the beginning, this is all new to us, right? We are kind of moving individual services and microservices over to Kubernetes. So when I first started my budgets, I was like, hey, how much of my percent am I using from last month's spend, right? And as you start tweaking that and start understanding more of your costs, then you can kind of start being more proactive. So yeah, I just kind of start with the percentages of last month's spend. And I think Harness provides a great opportunity. I use their budget capabilities all the time. You get alerted at 50% of your last month's spend, 75%, and those are all configurable. And that's what I use. It's so easy to just like configure it. And it kind of helps me with those finance conversations, right? That like if it's halfway through the month and I've already spent 75% of my spend, I'm well aware of it right now. Just so those monitors and those tweaks really help me. And that's kind of how I've learned to navigate these cost waters in the beginning.
Also, to go along with that is, how you actually organize. Like, so for Kubernetes, for example, how you organize your namespaces, how you handle label taxonomy, all can be very beneficial for not only for just soft isolation between applications, but also to help you quickly group applications by either a team or a department, but then go even further down into label taxonomy. So like sometimes we'll have namespaces that it's an application that's used by multiple customers in different ways. And having that and being very smart, leveraging label taxonomy in Kubernetes is a very good way. So like whatever tool you use to monitor your environments for either cost or just overall observability, having those are really, really good to be able to categorize and filter your workloads within Kubernetes.
Fair.
I think
Tor, JP? Tor, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, I would completely agree with Cory. It's something that we started working on quite early as well, getting labeling sorted early on and getting developers on board and compliant to the labeling taxonomy that you're using. But I think further to the budget, I think one of the kind of challenges that we're staring into at the moment is not just working out what the budgets are, but also what the costs or what the budgets actually should be based on what our partners and customers are actually using, what part of our costs a certain team should be using, considering what they're either contributing to the overall costs and profits of the system, but also in a way, how complicated is the task they're actually trying to solve? Are we solving this issue in a efficient manner, kind of cost-wise, which goes to efficiency of code and stuff like that as well. So I think that's kind of, we're already looking at the next challenge, not just how do we figure out what we're using and how do we plan ahead for what we're using, but how do we figure out what we should be using?
Fair enough. JP, anything to add on that?
I would agree with all of that. The budgets that Shelby mentioned, service limits, alarms. I think sometimes it's easy just to focus on the costs, and all you want to do is cut those to the bone. And really, it's more about value, right? Like the relation to the amount of revenue that, like worrying less about your compute bill and worrying more about the relationship between your compute bill and the revenue that compute is generating.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, JP, and I'll tell you as a CEO. So to me, it's not about cutting the cost to the bone. It's just really about having visibility into my costs, right? What am I paying for? I mean, I got this bill. Did we use it efficiently? Did we get what we needed? Did we, waste money on ludicrous things that we weren't, like having non-production production stuff still running 6 months after we took it out of production, right? I'd rather recycle that money into something that's going to help my bottom line, that's going to help my developers do more. So, I think that's an important distinction that we need to make at the panel and for everyone watching this at home, right? Is it's really not about cutting costs to the bone. If you're running your cloud operation to cut costs to the bone, stop. I mean, I would really, really caution against that. I think the more important thing is just have visibility, have a handle on what you're paying for your cloud so that you can make good business decisions and you're not resource starving nor wasting resources doing what you're looking to do there. I think that, that's, I mean, maybe someone in the CFO's office will feel differently, but that's kind of how I look at when we look at cloud.
And we're going through that right now too. I just want to echo that point because our finance teams, like our costs aren't raising, right? But we're conscious of them and we're aware of them. And we need to kind of continue to reiterate that value that we're providing, that we are scaling with our growth that we're seeing from our paying customers. And that's why our costs are going up. So it is a culture change that our organization is going through. So we can totally kind of understand what you're saying, Alan. And I don't know if Cory has anything to add for that. I think we just had that conversation with our finance directors last week, to be fully transparent with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a common conversation. We go through it here at Media Ops, frankly, right? Yeah, our bill goes up, but it's because you're getting more hits, you're getting more bandwidth, you're getting more resources, more storage. I mean, it's all relative, but you just want visibility into, so that you can plan around it. So, guys, I'm going to assume that you're all using Harness for in some way to help you with your cloud cost control, correct? And you wouldn't be here if you were totally unhappy with it. But this isn't a Harness commercial. What other kinds of tools, not necessarily competing to Harness, but other tools that you're using to help you have a handle on cloud costs that you could recommend out to our audience today? Anybody?
So I've before Harness offered their continuous efficiency tool, we were looking at a couple different options, including even building our own. And the last time I looked out there was a few other vendors. There's also, unfortunately, not a great amount of open source projects out there to tackle this problem, mainly because it's a very difficult problem to attack. There's not a lot of big vendors in this space yet. There's only a few large ones that I've seen, but I think, what's another tool I think I've seen out there is called Cloudability, but I have not worked with it directly. For us, the benefit was because we were already a Harness customer for their continuous deployment and tool. It made sense for us to just add in continuous efficiency, and we were one of the early testers for it with Harness. So we've been very, very happy with the product.
Very cool. JP, Tor, anything to add on that?
Yeah. So I mean, similar to what Cory's saying, we were kind of looking into this before the continuous efficiency kind of was announced. So we started with BigQuery and Data Studio on Google Cloud because we are a Google Cloud customer. And it kind of ties in. So we haven't stopped doing that either. We haven't stopped completely with that, even though we are using continuous efficiency. And there's one reason for that, which is kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier in terms of what's the next level of budgeting and figuring out your cost. And that's that we want to pull in data from other sources as well, such as Apogee. So we're looking at not only the consumption, but also how it would compare to the number of calls we get going through the API gateway. We're also looking at calls to Auth0 for authentication tokens, that kind of stuff. So our idea is to pull in as much data as possible to figure out where our costs are going in terms of which parts of our infrastructure or services are consuming which or how many resources. And I kind of wanted to tie that into another issue as well, which is that figuring out what these costs are goes deeper, because one thing is that you increase the number of calls to, say, the products API, but of course that will trickle down calls to other parts of the system, which will then also increase their costs. And kind of untangling these costs is really, I think, where the real challenge comes into in terms of working out your costs. I think it's also the fun part, to be honest, because one thing is kind of realizing how your system communicates, but also how increases in costs in one part of the system can also increase the costs in other parts of the system.
Yep. JP, anything? I don't want to leave you out.
No, sure. I think, we're new to continuous efficiency on harness. I've been really loving, the right sizing recommendations that it makes for deployments. I haven't seen another product that does that. Maybe you guys know of one, but outside of that, kind of like Cory, I looked into Cloudability, Apptio, Cloud Health, that kind of thing. Being in a hybrid organization and still having a significant on-prem presence, Cloud Health offers, since they're owned by VMware, a little bit more insight into those on-prem costs.
Got it. Have any of you checked out the FinOps Foundation? It's part of Linux Foundation. No, just throwing it out there. I mean, because Cory, to your point about open source, they're committed to some open source stuff with this. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time. Guys, we're almost out of time. I just had one other kind of question that I'll throw out to everyone. And, that is, at some point, this whole COVID thing, God willing, is in our rearview mirror, and we have a new normal. And, I don't think we're going to pick up everything we put in the cloud and move it back on premise. That's not going to happen. But 6 months, a year, 18 months out from now, are we going to be as concerned about cloud cost? Is it just going to be a mad rush that doesn't make a difference? Or do you think, because of tools like the harness tool, we'll have a kind of better visibility and move forward with a little more confidence in continuing to push as much to the cloud out as we can? Thoughts?
I kind of like what Tor said. He said that he made some comment to the effect of, how COVID has made them stronger. I think there's going to be a lot of anti-fragile organizations that come out of this. And I don't think, a focus on cost is going away.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I hit on it earlier too. I think it's full service ownership. Really having this better visibility into your costs is going to make you stronger and better at delivering your products that you own. So I think it's here to stay.
Yeah, I agree with Shelby on that. And it's just for us, we already operate primarily in the cloud. We continue to invest in that and grow in that, but also putting more ownership in front of teams individually instead of this black box that finance has to come yell at you. So I think the individual team ownership will increase our efficiency over time, and also a better understanding for engineering teams of how our business works and operates and its efficiency.
Tor will give you the last word.
Yeah, it's like me in the office. There's no going back. I don't think nothing will be the same. I think, even though, as you said, we'll see this in the rear view mirror, I think, first of all, the work we're doing now, why would we ever want to undo it? Why would we try to kind of lose the benefits that we've had? And not only that, I mean, I think COVID has been kind of like a black swan. That it's something that surprised us. We couldn't have seen it. Well, some people say they've seen it coming, but we couldn't be prepared for it in a sufficient way. But it's not going to be the last thing. There's always going to be something else that is going to impact us, and we always, I think, have to move forward and take these lessons that we've learned with us.
Fair enough. I agree. Guys, first of all, thank you all so much for being on our panel today, and for appearing here at our harness event. And you know what? You each are doing it right. You're moving that ball forward. I don't want to say controlling cloud costs, but understanding your cloud costs. And I think that's a better model than controlling cloud costs. And and you seem to be doing it well and succeeding. So congratulations to all of you. JP, Shelby, Cory, Tor, Magnus, Thanks for appearing. This is Alan Shimel. I hope you had a great time or learned something as well at today's panel. Enjoy the rest of the event, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.